Satrughna is the least known of the four brothers. We certainly hear about Satrughna that, like Lakshman was to Ram, Satrughna was to Bharat. Fast friends, inseparable friends. And just as Bharata was away from the royal palace when Dasarath decided to anoint Ram as the Prince Regent, Bharata was with Satrughna, so he wasn't present for Ram's coronation. And he always seems to be in the back seat, but we're putting him in the front seat tonight. And the situation was, he had volunteered to be the person who would do battle with Lavanasura. And Lavanasura was very powerful. We'll hear some about how powerful he was. First, a little bit of the genealogy. I don't know if you're very good with genealogy. I'm terrible with genealogy, but we'll go through it anyways. As we know, Ravana had a mother. Most persons born have a mother. So Ravana's mother was Kaikasi. And Kaikasi, Malyavan was Kaikashi's maternal uncle. And Kumbinasi was the unmarried daughter of Malyavan. So Malyavan had a daughter, and Malyavan's daughter, Kumbinasi, ended up marrying Madhu. She married Madhu because he was a Rakshasa who kidnapped her. So what we're going to do is see the connection between Lavanasura and Ravana, because there's a family or blood relation. So Madhu married Kumbinasi. So Ravana was the uncle of Madhu's son Lavanasura. So Madhu married Kumbinasi, and they had a son named Lavanasura. And if you don't remember all this, it's quite okay. But the main idea is that the battle that was done by Satrughna against Lavanasura was dealing with Ravana's uncle. Was the uncle, of Madhu's son, Lavanasura. So the story that we're going to hear is Lavanasura was harassing the rishis in Madhupuri. And in that area of Madhupuri was a sage named Chavanamuni. And Chavanamuni came all the way to Ayodhya to seek protection from Ramachandra. Should I go through this again? Who's related to whom? No. You all understand these things, right? Like I said the other evening, Vedic cosmology is much easier for me than understanding genealogy. Who's married to whom and who's somebody's uncle and who's somebody's this and that. I have a hard time with it. Okay, so we'll go to the image. This is a very ancient painting. As you see, it's in Arabic because when the rulers, Muslim rulers, were ruling in India for so many centuries, they had a great affinity for Ramayana. I mean, it's a wonderful literature. So this is a painting of on the left, that's Lavanasura and Satrughna doing him in. So the section of Ramayana opens with Ramachandra. How long did Ramachandra rule for? 11,000 years. That's a long time. So he was ruling for quite some time, and much to his surprise, Chavana Muni came to the royal palace in Ayodhya. So think of the distance between where Ayodhya is and where Mathura is, because Madhupuri was the previous name of today's Mathura. Madhupuri was the name then of today's Mathura, Madhupuri, named after the demon Madhu. Madhupuri became his place. And Chavana Muni happened to have his residence along with his other associates in that area, and Lavanasura was busy eating them. Wasn't a nice fellow. So Chavana Muni came with his Brahmana associates to Ayodhya. It was announced to Ramchandra that Chavana Muni had come. He got off his royal throne. He did all the proper receptions, washed their feet and offered them a sitting place and some refreshments and all due respect, and then asked what was the purpose of his coming to visit to Ayodhya. And Chavana Muni started describing the reason. And it goes back to all these names. Long, long ago, many years before, there was a Daitya who was virtuous or pious. His name was Madhu. And Madhu, in Satya Yuga, Madhu had done some austerities and had pleased Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva came before Madhu and wanted to give him a benediction. And Lord Shiva awarded him a lance, an invincible lance, because he was a pious and virtuous man. So he gave him an invincible lance. And Madhu then requested, Lord Shiva, may I have your permission to give this lance, invincible lance, to my descendants? He said no. And after some discussion, he then made, because Madhu was so pious, he made the following concession. You may give it at least to your son. And his son's name was Lavanasura, or Lavana, later Lavanasura. And Chavana Muni described, because he became very proud of having this invincible lance, and he was very powerful, he became a terror. And he was a Rakshasa terrorist, and his business was eating the rishis, harassing and eating the rishis. So he wanted relief. He said, we've understood that you have killed the invincible Ravana, and now can you please assist us in dealing with Lavanasura? Immediately, hearing this whole speech, Ramachandra said, I assure you that this demon Lavanasura will be finished. If you want, I can go myself Then he turned to his brothers and said, would any of you like to do this nice service? And immediately Bharata volunteered and said he would like to have that service of killing Lavanasura. And a little bit of out of character, because he was normally in the background, was Satrughna. But Satrughna thinking and said, Bharata has been through so much difficulty for the 14 years that you're in exile. Let him not have to do that service. Let me do that service. And Ramchandra smiled and said, so be it. It's very nice how you've spoken. And let's make the arrangement right now to anoint you as the king. He did the same thing with Bhishma. Vibhishan was anointed the king before they went to Lanka. So as soon as Ramchandra said all that and said to the other two brothers, begin making all arrangements, Satrughna was very sorry. I spoke out of turn. It's not proper that a younger brother should take the position of becoming a king before his older brother, and I've spoken wrongly, please forgive me. And Ramchandra was very pleased with his protocol and humility and said, no, but let us go through with this plan. In any case, you've accepted that service. It'll be very good. So they had a whole ceremony. He was anointed the king of Madhupuri, and then Ramchandra gave a little speech about what to do. My dear Satrughna, it is Lavanasura's habit to keep his invincible lance inside the house. And he only takes that invincible lance when there's an intruder, and otherwise, so you have to catch him when he's out of the house or out of his palace. And every morning he goes to hunt animals. He has a big lance, and on the big lance he puts the dead bodies of deer and tigers and whatever he captures, and then goes back and has his meal, just eating flesh. So when he's out, that's when you should go. And before you go, send a whole army, 4,000 horse soldiers, 2,000 chariot warriors, 1,000 foot soldiers, infantry. And here's 1 million gold coins you can use to maintain and provide salaries for the big army. And reminded him again, be sure that you catch him unaware, because if he has the invincible lance in his hand, you've got a problem. It's an invincible lance. So Satrughna accepted the service, and he accepted the soldiers, and he accepted the advice of Ramachandra. And 1 month before he left, he sent his army to make arrangements for his arrival. And after 1 month, he left the royal palace. In 2 days' time, he reached Valmiki's ashram. It gives us some idea of the distance away that Valmiki's ashram was, and Sita was there. And that night that he arrived, at midnight, the 2 sons were born. The twin sons of Sita were born. And that early morning, Valmiki performed the rituals of a newborn child. Specifically, it gives information in Valmiki Ramayan how they got their name. He used kusha grass, and to ward off evil ghosts and other spirits that might be lingering, with the upper end of the kusha grass, he cleaned the body of one, and the lower end of the kusha grass, he cleaned the body of the other, and thus they got their name. The upper tip of the kusha grass and lower portion of the kusha grass. Lava and kusha, or kusha and lava. And Satrughna was the witness of all of this. The first morning of their birth. After he stayed for some days, Valmiki provided suitable hospitality for Satrughna, and then he made his journey the rest of the way. And the next stop that's described in Valmiki Ramayana is he reached the hermitage of Chavanamuni. And in the hermitage of Chavanamuni, Chavanamuni is going to give further instructions to Satrughna what to do, what not to do. Satrughna wanted to know how powerful, and that's one of the rules before you have a battle, what's the strength of the other party. Ram did the same thing. So Chavanamuni said, a previous ancestor in the Ikshvaku dynasty was named Mandata. And Mandata was very, very powerful. He was planning not only to rule the world, because the Ikshvaku dynasty ruled the world, but he wanted to rule in the heavenly realms as well. And when Indra came to know that that was his plan, Indra approached Mandata and said, before you try to take control of the heavenly kingdom, you should control the rest of the earth planet. He said, who is there on this earth planet that I haven't defeated in battle? He said, there's one demon named Lavanasura in Madhupuri, because he was the son of Madhu. So he's very powerful. And he said, immediately I'm going to go and challenge him. So he went to Madhupuri with an army, and when he went, using his same program, he had gone out of the palace to do his hunting, bringing animals, etc. And while he was gone, Mandata conquered the city. And he was waiting at the gate when he came back. And Lavanasura saw him and laughed and said, who are you? You came at the right time. I'm hungry. It's my breakfast time. And he said who he was. I'm Mandata from the Ikshvaku dynasty, and I've come here to slay you. And he laughed. And he went inside the palace, got his spear, one toss of the spear, and Mandata was dead. Very, very powerful. And then what happens with the spear is it went back to Lavanasura's hand. So Mandata was dead. And so Chavana warned him once again, when you approach him, make sure he's out of the city or out of his palace, and make sure he doesn't have that spear in his hand, because he has this practice. When he goes hunting in the morning, he leaves the spear inside. So Satrughna followed Chavanamuni's advice, and it was at noon that Lavanasura had gone out, and very similar program. Satrughna took over the palace, the city, and was standing at the gate, and Lavanasura came back. Yeah. My name is Satrughna. I've come here to slay you, just as a just reward for your wicked deeds. Lavanasura laughed and said, even though Ram has killed Ravana, the brother of my maternal aunt, Shurpanakha, I merely excused him out of contempt, for I did not consider him worthy of my challenge. So they had a big battle, and in the big battle, back and forth, and Lavanasura hit him in the head with a tree trunk, very powerful, and he fell to the ground as if unconscious or maybe dead. So Lavanasura chuckled and was heading for the gate to go in and get his lance. Fortunately, Satrughna came to consciousness again, and he took an arrow that had specifically been given to him by Ramachandra to destroy Lavanasura. And when he drew the arrow, the whole sky became illumined, very, very bright, brilliant, like lightning in all directions. And the demigods were taken aback at the brilliance from this weapon, and he fired the weapon, and he destroyed Lavanasura. And the rishis were observing all of this battle, and they congratulated him because he was just an invincible, wicked person. And then he occupied the city as the next king, because one king defeated the other king. And he remained in Madhupuri for 12 years. And he decided that at that time it was time to return back to Ayodhya to pay a visit to his family, to Ram and his brothers, etc. So on his way back, he stopped at Valmiki's ashram. And by this time, the boys are now 12 years old, because they were born when he was on his way. He may need a chair or someplace like that. You got a chair, good. Yeah. This needed some editing. And I didn't do that properly. So Satrughna is now in the ashram of Valmiki. He was received very affectionately by Valmiki. He offered him a meal, and then he wanted the boys to have a Ramayana concert, because he had trained them not only in the words of the whole Ramayana, which they knew by heart, but musical performance to accompany, and so he wanted Satrughna to hear. And as they sang so beautifully and played their musical instruments so beautifully, he wanted to know, Satrughna wanted to know, who has composed all this? Because he was with all of his soldiers. And Satrughna said, we shouldn't ask Valmiki this question. Your curiosity is all right. But Satrughna was mesmerized by the beauty of the recitation of Ramayana. And when he got back to Ayodhya 2 days later, he saw Ram seated on his royal throne, and he informed Ramachandra that the mission that you sent me on has been accomplished, and I've been living in Madhupuri for 12 years, and I've been in separation from you for 12 years, and now I would like your permission to reside in Ayodhya without returning back to Madhupuri. So Ram embraced him and said, "That's your sentiment is very nice, but you're the king. You can't stay here. It's the duty of the king to rule over his kingdom and his subjects and protect them. So you have to return to Madhupuri. You can visit Ayodhya from time to time." And then he offered some very magnanimous words. you're more dear to me than my very self. He expressed things like that sometimes to Lakshmana, or sometimes things like that to Bharata, but here he's saying the same thing to Satrughna. Please stay here for 7 days and then return. So Satrughna stayed for 7 days and then he returned. And then this section of Ramayana goes on to a scene where, just like Chavana Muni had come to lodge a complaint and concern and request for some service, it was part of the routine as a king that anyone in the kingdom could come and express some grief, and he would address the grief or the difficulty. So one time, an elderly Brahmana from a distant village arrived, and he was carrying in his arms the dead body of his son. And he asked Ramchandra, what crime have I committed in my previous life that while I'm still alive, my son has died? He was not yet 14, and now his mother and I are filled with grief. Never before in the kingdom of Ram has a son died before his parents. Therefore, the death of my son must be due some fault of Ram. In fact, when the king becomes negligent in performing his duties, such anomalies can occur. Ram, you must return my son, because otherwise you're guilty of killing Brahmanas. You're reclaimed as a great ruler in the Ikshvaku dynasty. How are you going to be able to live happily knowing that your sins are causing the result of death of Brahmanas in your kingdom? So, what did Ram do? He called for his assembled ministers and rishis, and Ram informed of what the Brahmana had said, the elderly Brahmana. And then Narada spoke. I shall disclose to you the reason for the child's death. Then you may act as you see fit. In Krita Yuga, or Satya Yuga, the previous Yuga, everyone was Brahmanically qualified. And by performing austerity, they achieved liberation from material bondage. In that golden age, wisdom was the rule, and there were no untimely deaths. Then, in the beginning of Treta Yuga, 4 social divisions were created. The Kshatriyas were practically as qualified as the Brahmanas, and they were both allowed to perform tapasya. In the Dwapara Yuga, irreligiosity will increase, and thus many irregularities will be introduced. As a concession, the Vaishyas will also be allowed to perform austerities, but the Shudras will be strictly forbidden to do so. Thereafter, in the Kali Yuga, even Shudras will be allowed to perform austerities. Indeed, in that degraded age, there will be practically no qualified Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, or Vaishyas. O Rama, it is a very serious offense for a Shudra to practice austerity in this age. It happens, however, that there is one such person in your kingdom. There is a Shudra executing very severe penances, and he is the cause of the child's death. O king, irreligiosity in is a state's worst enemy. Therefore, the ruler who fails to punish wrongdoers deserves to suffer in hell. You must find out this culprit at once, so that religious principles may be upheld and the Brahmana's son restored to life. So Ram was pleased by these words of Narada. He then requested Lakshmana, go at once to the palace gate and tell the Brahmana to preserve the dead body of his child in a vat of oil. after supplying the necessary herbs. Then Ram called for his Pushpaka chariot. The Pushpaka chariot just comes just by the mind's calling it. And leaving Ayodhya in the care of Lakshman and Bharata, he went in search for the culprit. This region, that region, the other region. Near Sarvala mountain, because his kingdom is the world, he came to a large lake. And Ram sighted an ascetic hanging head downward, engaged in severe austerities. What great austerities, what great determination. Tell me, O formidable one, who are you? And what is your caste? I am Ram, the son of Dasarath, and you have aroused my curiosity. For what purpose are you undergoing so much trouble? So it's open-ended questions. He's omniscient, but he's giving him, you could say, his day in court. Are you seeing the heavenly planets, or have you some other goal? Seeking. Are you a Brahmana, a heroic Kshatriya, or a Vaishya or Sudra? Please tell me the truth. Hanging upside down, the ascetic said, my name is Shambhuka. I was born from the womb of Shudrani. Despite this shortcoming, I am performing austerities so that in my next life I can attain the planets of the demigods. Immediately, his speaking this way, Ram unsheathed his terrible sword and slashed off the Shudra's head. From the sky came shouts of, well done, excellent. Showers of flowers came from the demigods. Being exceedingly pleased, the demigods appeared before Ram and declared, O Lord, you have done us a great favor by performing this noble act. You have ensured that the Shudra will not attain to heaven in violation of religious principles. What was that? Upstairs something? Okay. Ram requested Indra, if you are truly pleased with me, then kindly restore the Brahmana's son to life. It was due to my own fault that the boy died. I promised the Brahmana that I would restore his life. Please allow my words to hold true. Indra replied, certainly the child has already been revived and reunited with his parents. He regained his life as soon as the Shudra's head fell to the ground. Some years later, Ram decided to visit the sage Agastya, who had just completed executing austerities by living within water for 12 years. Accompanied by the demigods on his Pushpaka chariot, they arrived at the Rishi's ashram, Agastya. There's the reciprocation of exchanges and greeting and so forth. Agastya said, my dear Lord, it is my great fortune that you have come here as my respected guest. Please honor me in return by accepting these golden ornaments manufactured long ago by Vishwakarma. And Ram declined. Rishis are permitted to accept charity, not Kshatriyas. The only gift I may receive from you is your valuable words of instruction. Lesson. Agastya said, in the Satyuga there were no kings. Thus, one day, the people went to Lord Brahma and requested him to assign them a ruler. In response, Lord Brahma called for the principal demigods and commanded them to donate various portions of their potencies. Thereafter, Lord Brahma sneezed, and from his nostrils was born a king. Kshupa. Lord Brahma then endowed Kshupa with a portion of Indra's energy so that he could rule over the earth, a portion of Varuna's energy to maintain his body, a portion of Kuvera's energy for possession of wealth, a portion of Yamaraja's energy for chastising wrongdoers. My dear Lord Ram, in the same spirit, you should take these celestial ornaments from me. So he's using history to say demigods gave their benedictions to a king, so you should accept these. Ram replied, my dear Rishi, I accept your words, and I will accept the ornaments. Now, please describe how you came to possess them. Long ago, so here's the reply. Long ago, during the present Treta Yuga, I performed penances in this very vast forest. I originally entered the forest out of curiosity. Thus, I found a desolate ashram that was enchanting in appearance. After passing one night there, I found a dead body lying on the ground. To my surprise, I was struck by the beauty of the corpse and stared at it for some time. Suddenly, a celestial chariot descended from the sky. Within it was an effulgent person surrounded by Gandharvas and Apsaras who were singing and dancing. That splendorous person got down from the chariot and began to feed on the dead body. I was astonished to see this, and so I questioned, how is it that you can engage in such an abominable act? Pretty interesting, isn't it? That person replied, oh Rishi, my name is Sveta. I am the son of the illustrious Sudeva, and my brother is Surata. After the death of my father, that's Sudeva, the citizens made me their king. After ruling for a great while, I considered my duration of life was coming to an end. Thus, I retired to the forest after installing my brother, Surata, on the royal throne. Finally, after executing severe austerities for 3,000 years, I ascended to Brahmaloka. However, I was surprised to find that I remained afflicted by great pains of hunger and thirst. I therefore inquired, my dear Brahma, the residents of your supreme abode are freed from such disturbances. How then am I suffering from hunger and thirst? Brahma replied, O Sveta, although you performed penances for a long time, you never gave in charity. Thus, for this reason, you now suffer from hunger and thirst, even here in Brahmaloka. Now, to appease you, I ordain that human flesh shall serve as your meal. O king, you shall suffer the effects of this curse until you meet the great sage Agastya. So now they're meeting. Agastya then said, my dear Brahmana, my dear Lord Ram, as arranged by destiny, I one day came to meet Sweta. In gratitude for being relieved from his distress, he begged me to accept these ornaments. That's the interesting answer to the question, how did you come up with these ornaments that he now wants to give to Lord Ramachandra? Ram then inquired, my dear Rishi, why is it that this place, where Sweta formerly performed austerities, is devoid of all beasts and birds? Agastya replied, my dear Ram, in the Krita Yuga, or Satya Yuga, there lived a great king named Manu, who was the founder of the social system consisting of the 4 occupational duties. Later, Manu's son, Ikshvaku, inherited the kingdom. In his turn, he begot 100 sons. The youngest son of Ikshvaku was very dull. and never obeyed his brothers. Thus he received the name Danda, rod for chastisement. Danda founded the kingdom which extends between the Vindhya mountains and the Saivala mountains. That's the Dandak forest, named after Danda. His capital city was named Madhu Mantra, and Shukracharya became his sacrificial priest. Shukracharya, priest of the demons. One day, after having ruled over the kingdom for a long time, Danda went to visit the ashram of Shukra. Upon his arrival, he happened to see the Rishi's beautiful daughter, Araja, loitering around there, alone. The very sight of her caused the king to immediately become overcome by lust. Danda then forcefully embraced Araja and proceeded to gratify himself with her, even though she was unwilling. The king then returned to his capital. Soon thereafter, Shukra was informed by a disciple of what had happened. When he returned to his ashram, his daughter was there shedding tears. The rishi then angrily cursed the king, Danda. Let Indra devastate Danda's entire kingdom by raining down dust for 7 days, so that everything becomes buried and all creatures die. Shukra then ordered the residents of his ashram to leave that forest and further commanded his daughter, Araja, to continue living there in samadhi. O Ram, Shukra's curse soon took effect, and from that day onward, this forest is known as Dandak Aranya. Lord Brahma passed the night at Agastya's ashram, and the next morning departed for Ayodhya. Brahma. Soon after his return, Lord Ram expressed his desire to perform the Rajasuya Yajna. Bharata then said, My dear elder brother, all the kings of the earth look upon you just like a father. Therefore, you should not do anything which will cause them to suffer. All of these kings are fully obedient to you, and thus you should not threaten them with destruction. Lord Ram gladly accepted Bharata's advice. Lakshmana then proposed he perform the Ashwamedha Yajna instead. Lakshmana cited how Indra formally became freed from all sinful reactions after slaying Vritrasura by performing the horse sacrifice. In turn, Ram pointed out how Illa, the son of Kardama, regained his manhood by similar sacrifice. Lord Ram then had Lakshmana call for the great rishis, Vishishta, Vamana, Jabalyani, and Kashyapa. After receiving their approval, he sent out invitations to other kings, Sugriva, Vibhishan. The challenging horse was then released to wander at will. Thereafter, the great sacrifice commenced at Naimisharanya, as kings and princes poured in from all over the world. Bharata and Satrughna received them with great hospitality. Sugriva and the other monkeys were assigned to look after entertainment, while Vibhishan and the other Rakshasas were assigned to attend to the comforts of the rishis. During the sacrificial performance, charity and food were distributed in profusion. Thus, no one could be seen who appeared to be dejected or neglected. Indeed, wealth and clothing were heaped as high as hills all around the sacrificial area. Thus, the festivities continued for 1 full year, as the challenge horse roamed over the earth under the protection of Lakshmana. So that's a little description of a brahmana that had a distress and came to see Ramachandra. Also, part of the reason for reading this is it mentions Satrughna's name. It's not to mention too many times in Ramayana. But it's not connected to Satrughna, but there was a scene where similar daily practice, the king would sit on the royal throne and anyone from the kingdom could come. And one day there was no one that came. Imagine, president, anyone can say any problem they have and no one had a problem. So Ramchandra said to Lakshman, go look and see who's there. He said, there's nobody there. I went, look, nobody's there. Go look again. He went again, nobody's there. Go look again. And he didn't see somebody, he saw a dog, an emaciated, smashed dog standing by the doorway. So Ramchandra invited him in, that he was a talking dog. And Ramchandra asked him, how did you get smashed up like this? He said there was a brahmana who this the shorter version. He became very angry with me and he beat me severely. And what was the name of that person? So they found the name of the person. They found the person. They brought the person to say his side of the story. And he acknowledged, yes, this dog, I beat him severely. And he described the reason that irritated him. So he wasn't the dog, it was something else irritated him, and he beat the dog severely. So now his acknowledgement for having smashed the dog, and the dog was at the gate to inform the king that he had been abused in this terrible way. And so he was asked, there was a mendicant Brahmin, his name was Sarvata Siddha. I didn't bring the glasses that I need for my computer. I left them. Sorry. So there were other sages present. Ram asked the other sages present what to do about this situation. They said, ask the dog, what would he like as punishment? And the dog said, this Brahmana that beat me, please make him in charge of the Kalanjara monastery. And Ram looked at him with surprise and said, why, he's beaten you and you want him to put him in charge of a monastery? And then the dog told the story. Yes, because it looks like an award, but it could be a punishment, because before I was born as a dog, I was the chief priest of that monastery. And because I was proud of my position, I abused my position and hurt many people because of being proud of my position. And in my next life, I became a dog. So let this man become the chief priest of the monastery, and he can fly straight or fly crooked. And if he's crooked, he'll become a dog. I don't have to curse him to become a dog. He can be in charge of the monastery. Then he can go either direction, make his own choices. Ram thought that was very wise. So they put him in charge of the monastery. Doesn't say what happened after that, so don't ask me. But it's part of a good ruler is to hear from citizens. It's not that all, this was a different yuga. Do that today and you won't do anything else. What to speak of, make wise decisions about what should be done about X, Y, Z things that come up. Like Chavana Muni coming because of Lavanasura with his invincible spear. What do you do? But it's a principle. Woven within Ramayana are many, many, many principles. So back to the topic that I chose as one of the topics to speak about is the service-mindedness of Satrughna. Now there was some discussion in between the morning class which had nothing to do with Ramayana, and here, and one devotee was asking some questions about Lakshmana as guru, and this devotee is from China, and previously, before coming here, I had spoken on part 1, part 2, and part 3 about Lakshmana, because there's a lot to say about Lakshmana. And one of the characteristics ascribed to Lakshmana by Govindaraj is like the superlative commentator out of all the commentators on Valmiki Ramayana. And he ascribed one of the characteristics of Lakshmana is Sheshatvam. So Sheshatvam is not a phrase so much used by, in Gaudiya Vaishnavas. It's a very common term used by Sri Vaishnavas who comment on Ramayana, and Govindaraj being one of them. And it's the characteristic of Lakshmana was absolute surrender to the personality of Godhead, to Lord Ramachandra, having one mission in his life and no other mission. Kind of our understanding is like Bhagavad Gita 2:41. Welcome. Bhagavad Gita 2:40. Are you familiar with Bhagavad Gita? You know the verse? Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kudanandana. You don't know that verse? Any of our adults here in the room know that verse? Very important verse. Bahushaka Bhutayo Vyavasayinam. It's a transition verse in chapter 2, moving from Sankhya to Buddhi Yoga. The first part of Bhagavad Gita, I'm just going away a little bit from the Satrughna, but you'll see I'll come back. Eke Hakudanandana, the practice of devotional services where one's intelligence is singular. Buddhayo Vyavasayinam. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. Ekeha. The same as Sheshatvam. It's just one purpose. What's the one purpose? Serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's Buddhi Yoga, which one can also say is Bhakti Yoga, which can also say is that Sheshatvam. And Lakshmana had that characteristic to the maximum. Now, Satrughna had it in a different way. His role in Ram's Leela is a little more removed, but he had no interest certainly all of them were followers of Dharma, and they knew their position, and the elder brother is in the superior position because he's the elder brother. But the elder brother, in their case, happened to be superlatively qualified, so it was a good fit. So he did what Lord Ramachandra said. He went and ruled for 12 years. When he said go back after 7 days, he went back. Just the word of Lord Ramachandra was it. He had his desire. Ramchandra had his desire. And Ramchandra's desire was it. That's this Eke Hakudanandana or Sheshatvam principle. So it's not that only Lakshmana had it, but Lakshmana had it in a superlative degree. And they all had it because they're perfected representatives of the system of service to the Supreme Lord, one of them being the Supreme Lord. But he was completely subordinate to the principle of Dharma and being the servant of Dharma. Of course, that's a major theme throughout the whole of Ramayana. These are within the whole of Ramayana, so many lessons and lessons and lessons within lessons. And different lenses to look at the same thing in it from a different angle and come to a different understanding of the same thing and learn lessons. So it's such a wonderful literature. And Satrughna exemplifies this Sheshatvam in his own way. And he had the power and the wisdom to defeat this Lavanasura that even the demigods couldn't deal with. Or his predecessor, great ruler who ruled the world and was planning to rule the heavenly kingdom, Mandata, was defeated. Of course, he had some advice from Chavana Muni as well as from Ramachandra, what mistake to not make. Don't let him get his hands on that invincible lance. So he followed instructions, and he had the power and the strength and the capacity to give shelter to all of his citizens. So it must have been an ordeal because they were being ruled by demon number one. Demon number one, so much so that when his relative Ravana was killed, he didn't bother. He considered the person who killed him to be inconsequential. Didn't even bother. So he's a wonderful personality, and the service-mindedness, because there was some service to give protection to the rishis and to all the other people that were under Lavanasura's rule. He took that up. Just this morning, I was hearing Prabhupada speaking. I do a lot. I really like hearing Prabhupada every day. At least an hour and a half every day. I'm doing some other things, but at least an hour and a half. So today, Prabhupada was speaking with, he was in London, some fellow that was a little speculative and a little puffed up, and rarely does Prabhupada even let elevated persons speak as much as he let this man speak, but he was speaking a lot. And Prabhupada was making one of the points he was making was there's a lot of misunderstanding about the position of Arjuna, and the misunderstanding of the position of Arjuna was that he was mistaken and misguided, and therefore he wanted to not perform his duty, etc., etc., etc. But he was taking that position as if he was one of us, so that Krishna could give his instruction to us through his dear devotee Arjuna. So the whole of Ramayan is also giving us instruction. It's at times, different personalities would take different roles. And sometimes, for example, we heard it the other day about Lakshmana. This is a teaching from Rupa Goswami. Sometimes Lakshmana was just the obedient servant. Predominantly, that was his mood, Sheshatvam, just the obedient servant. But sometimes, it's like in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, sometimes there's a mixture of rasas. Sometimes it behaved just like a friend. And so then, when he would behave just like a friend, they would have discussions. Not just, whatever you want, sir, that's it. Because you're the master and I'm the servant. That's how Dhruva Maharaj spoke. So anyway, sometimes he would serve so lovingly that, as we heard already, Ram said that I'm not feeling separation from my father because you're taking care of me just like my father. So there were differences of relationships, is the point. And with Lakshman and Ram, so the mixed rasas, predominantly the Sheshatva mood, the servant, the totally submissive servant. But it's, as we discussed, these moods move a little bit from the strict Vaikuntha mood. There's Narayan, and then there's everybody else. In Ayodhya, it's Narayan, it's Ram and everybody else, but there's also additional moods that are being exhibited in Ayodhya. It's a very special place. And the Leela is more human-like, and therefore different moods other than just awe and veneration. So it's very special. Of course, there's Krishna in his pastimes in Vrindavan and Dwarka. It's more special indeed. As far as rasa is concerned, it's not that the devotees in Ram's Leela, if they gave him the choice, would you like this other situation than your present situation, they're fully satisfied. They're not envious. And I want a different situation, please. That one looks nicer to me. They're fully satisfied. But there's variety, because within the Supreme Lord, there's diversity, there's everything, and so there's varieties of rasa. And the position of Bharata, although he's more remote, his character is fully one of service. Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha purananda. He exemplifies that characteristic very nicely. What do you think? One of the benefits of hearing about the pastimes of the Lord is they're role models. They're models of inspiration. Not that we can become them or exactly become like them, but follow in the footsteps of these great personalities, become inspired by the standard of purity of love and devotion, and follow in their footsteps to our capacity. And when there are persons who are profound lovers of the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, their character is very elevated. They can more easily stay fixed in Dharma and not sway from Dharma. Because as we heard this little description, as the ages pass, Dharma gets all blurry and Kali Yuga gets washed away, almost. So all the more reason why the importance of hearing about these elevated personalities and their loving exchanges with the Supreme Lord and his loving exchanges with them. It's purifying and elevating, very naturally so. Is everything all right? You sure? Okay. Looked like something wasn't all right. Okay. Any discussion?
Thank you, Maharaj, for another beautiful class. If you allow me, I just wanted to add a little bit on Sheshatva.
I'm sure I was expecting, not just a little bit.
Yeah, so you brought out the point of Sheshatvam that is displayed
I saw your eyes get really big. Right?
On Sheshatvam, because our acharyas have spoken a lot about Sheshatvam.
Yes, I know.
But they have spoken one level above Sheshatvam.
Really?
Which is called as Paratantriyam.
Paratantriyam, yes.
That is displayed by Bharata. And to simply share like the difference between Sheshatvam and Paratantriyam.
Let's hear it.
as you know, Maharaj, is Lakshmana did everything for Rama.
Everything.
But there was a little bit of his decision making in that, because when Rama said, "Don't come with me," he fought with
Yeah, he disagreed.
He disagreed and went with Rama. Because in the mood of Seshatvam, he wanted to protect him or serve him. And so he fought with Rama and then went along with him. But Bharata, when Rama said, "No, I'm not coming, you go rule it," he accepted it, but he said that, "Give me your Padaka and your Padaka will represent you, and on its command I will rule the kingdom." So that's what our acharyas say, that Bharata is Paratantriyam, one step ahead, above Seshatvam. And they also glorify Satrughna as saying that he is the most elevated of all the four.
Really?
Because like Bhagavan is there, Bhagavan is Bhagavan, so he's already Bhagavan.
Yeah.
And Lakshmana is serving the Bhagavan, so he's great. But he's displaying the mood of Seshatvam. Bharata is one level above Seshatvam because he's doing everything what Bhagavan wants, so he's displaying Paratantriyam. And I know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also has said this, that more than serving the Bhagavan, serving the devotee of the Bhagavan is even more higher. So they say that Satrughna is the most highest character in the Ramayana.
That's one lens. As you know, I shared with, just in response, we're having a little appreciation of looking at the same thing through different lenses. Same thing. One of the ways to look at the same thing is Bharata has a particular mood, and Lakshman has another particular mood. As I already just expressed, in terms of rasa, he has varieties of rasa, and there's a hierarchy in the varieties of rasa. But the hierarchy in the varieties of rasa, this is a nice topic, is in the eyes of the rasika, the person who's experiencing the rasa. And from their perspective, it's perfect. And if somebody says, "More perfect," this is perfect. Thank you. I'm feeling completely fulfilled. Thank you. So, from the different lenses to look at the same thing, the lens, like we heard a little bit about Lakshman being in the mood and the service of Swayam Prakash, as the Lord Ram is Swayam Rupa, he's Swayam Prakash. He's revealing the form of the Lord, or the personality, the qualities, the activities, through his medium of assisting in service in that capacity. And that's the guru function. So there's different ways of looking at the same thing. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So far, Bharata, Satrughna, Lakshmana, Hanuman, Sugriv, Vibhishan, everyone seems to be exhibiting Dasaras or some form of it. And maybe Sita, like from an earlier class, we've talked about how she's also serving.
She has no one but Ram as her Lord.
So she's serving Ram. That's her.
But we're all serving, aren't we? Everyone by constitution.
Right. Yeah, Maharaj.
And then?
But everyone is exhibiting Dasyaras.
They also have other modes and flavors, like friendship. Fraternal love is part of their mood of love for one another as brothers.
Okay. Yeah, that was my question. Like, was there anything specifically? Because Krishna and the Coward Boys are all like friendship sort of deal. Is there anything like that in the Ramayan?
Let's do this one. We discussed it. Maybe you missed that class. Haridam and Golokadam. There's Aishvarya and Madhurya. Now, in Golokadam, there's Aishvarya also. But the Madhurya is so strong, it eclipses or conceals the Aishvarya. And Ayodhya is at the topmost, not yet in the same position from the Vaishnava, Gaudiya Vaishnava perspective, because rasa becomes more significant. For example, does Narayan have a mother and father? Does Narayan have brothers? Does Narayan have friends? But there are those relationships in Ayodhya. But the mood in Goloka is so strong, they don't see the Aishwarya, although he exhibits it, because the Madhurya is so strong. Now that's a Gaudiya Vaishnava perspective on distinction of rasa. So that the rasa variation is there. Yes, there is servitude, but servitude is the foundational principle of all the rasas. Servitude is there in all the rasas. When Mother Yasoda is loving Damodar, she loves as a mother. And is so strong, she doesn't see it, even when she sees everything within his mouth. So he's showing her his Aishwarya, but she can't see it. He's lifting Govardhan Hill. He's showing his Aishwarya. To have another experience, because Madhurya is so strong. That's from a rasa perspective. So the Ayodhya is somewhere in between. It's not only dasya. There's diversity, and as I mentioned now third time, there's a mixture of rasa. It's in the whole section of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Mixture of rasa doesn't mean like watered down. It means that sometimes, and then sometimes that becomes less prominent, and something else becomes more prominent, and then so their personalities have a mixture of humors or tastes or rasas in their loving exchange with Krishna, because he likes and they like serving in those different ways. And some are more servitude, and that's a different.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Behind you.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much for such a beautiful, wonderful class. Could you please help me understand that part again, where Lord Ram, on the complaint of that Brahmana that they lost their son, went and chopped the head off a Sudra? That seems, at least to me, little immoral from my perspective, because what I have seen in other pastime as well, that demons like Hiranyakashipu or Ravan doing severe austerity, and in return they get some boon, which is
not from Vishnu.
Not from Vishnu, but from different demigods.
So have you answered your own question? What was the best thing? The best thing wasn't give him some boon. His in their case, their austerity was creating disturbance in the kingdom that would continue as long as that was to continue. And Narada's advice was stop it. No, he could have stopped it in some other ways. It's not for you or me to take the sense of morality that binds you and me and impose that morality on Lord Ramachandra. So I don't know. I'm sure there's commentary from our acharyas on that scene from Ramayana. I'm not familiar with their commentary, but my understanding is it was beneficial for the person, and beneficial for the persons connected to that person. Because the whole world, the kingdom was the world, was being adversely impacted by that one person. So others were being relieved. So it is certainly part of the duty of a police force or a king to stop corruption or that which is bringing suffering and misery to others, what to speak of the whole world. And if necessary, so where's the line of when it's not necessary, when it's necessary? When is a person death penalty to be meted? That's another thing. But when a ruler, when death penalty, in modern times, there's all this discussion about should there or shouldn't there be capital punishment. In Vedic culture, there's capital punishment, depending upon the severity. And this capital punishment is not simply punishment, it's to relieve that person of the sinful reaction that would plague them and others because of their sinful deed, or deeds, plural. I understand your question. To use you looking at what Ram did through the lens of our modern sensibility of nonviolence and fairness and et cetera, it's really harsh. It's really severe. It's something that should be done. So is there a case for capital punishment? Yes. And one has to be very wise, and a king needs to be under the guidance of Brahmanas. In this case, it was Narada Muni told them, deal with this. Because there's this Brahmana, he didn't do anything, his son didn't do anything, but they're being impacted by this fellow. Find the fellow and stop it.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, wonderful class. Just on the same topic.
Same.
But the point
Chopping his head?
No, Maharaj. On the same topic that Krishna tells in the Bhagavad Gita that he is the one created for varnas based on quality.
Yeah.
Right? But in this context, what I heard, of course, I was listening on the YouTube while coming here, that because he's born to the Shudrani, he became a Shudra by birth. But the performing austerity is a quality, right, Maharaj? So I'm trying to understand that. How do we understand that?
Nice question. I'm pausing because I'm not sure. I'm weighing different possible explanations. That's the pause. Just from the section that we read, the divisions of the four varnas and ashrams came after something, and initially there was not even a king. So, and then et cetera, et cetera. So what was the rule governing persons during Ramchandra's time? Was it, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that's one of the pauses. Now, generally speaking, persons born in a certain family would have, but just like this, Madhu was from a Daitya family, but he is of good character. Or Prahlad Maharaj was born of a demoniac family, but he was of perfect character, and even went in the womb of his mother. And who was his father? but he was a great devotee. Or go to King Rishabdev and his 100 sons. Some were Kshatriyas, some were Brahmanas, so not by birth, and some were beyond the Varnashram system, the Navayogendras. So it's certainly possible in previous ages. That's what it was with the pause. I was just scanning. It was the same principle that Krishna speaks of in Bhagavad Gita, not by birth, but by guna and karma. So what was the guna and karma of this fellow? What was the guna and karma? So that the concern that was expressed from the section that we read was he was born of a Shudrani, and therefore he shouldn't be doing austerities. Then what should he be doing? Because the teaching of Rishabdev is to po divyam putrakayena shudyat sattvam. Everyone, the human form of life, not regardless of what varna you're born in, but the human form of life is meant for tapo divyam. So what's the tapo divyam for a Shudra? Hanging upside down under a tree and, aspiring to become a denizen of the heavenly realm? So what's the guna there, beside from the janma? What's the quality to be doing that which he was doing? Now, it doesn't give an explanation. Again, I'm sure, because there are multiple commentaries on Ramayana, and I'm not familiar with them, like I'm familiar with, what our Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas have commented on Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't have that familiarity. I've already been doing, getting on this topic, it takes some research time. And but I'll do it. Snehavali, can you make a note? To send me a note, and I'll find out what commentary is known from our acharyas on that particular scene. This Shudra that he chopped his head. What about he's not Shudra by birth, he's Shudra by quality and character. What our commentaries are said about that fellow, and why Ram decided to do what he did. But the starting point is he is all good absolute. So that's not negotiable. So why did he do what he did? The question is, because he's not looking at the person from his birth, but his quality, guna and karma. What was it that he saw that caused him to not even ask a question, just chop him? My thought is going a little bit to Hanuman's ability to discern the difference between Shurasa and Simhika. One was, he negotiated with, and the other one he just destroyed instantly. I mean, he knew what to do, and he did it, and no dialogue, just finish her. So some discernment on Hanuman's side, where she's coming from and where the other one was coming from. Yeah. Yes, I see your hand. We'll give you the microphone after him. In the back.
So, Maharaj, just one point comes to my mind on this topic.
Which one?
This Shudra.
Oh, getting chopped, okay.
Topic that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, 4th verse, 4th chapter, 13th verse, when the Shaunakadi rishis are questioning Sri Suta Goswami, and in that verse they say, please explain us all that you have heard, except for the certain Vedic chandas. And then in the commentary, Sri Jiva Goswami writes that by birth Sri Suta Goswami was born of a Shudra, mother was a Shudra,
Yes.
Shudrani, and so he, to protect the culture, he himself, Suta Goswami, did not learn the Vedas, the Chandas, because that's the tradition.
It's restricted.
That's restricted, but he was so very elevated that even the 88,000 Brahmanas,
Heard.
as soon as they saw him, they gave up all their 1,000-year yajna and put him instead on the pedestal to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from him. So I thought that was
It's relevant.
relevant.
They're acknowledging his quality at the same time acknowledging his birth
Yes.
and asking him to serve according to his quality. But by birth, there's certain things that he's not going to be able to speak about, and so they're not going to ask him about those things.
Yes.
So it's a blend.
Yes, Maharaj. And if
Does that help? Go ahead. No, this is discussion time. That's me either. Right.
Still there is an option now. The option of Kreta is of course, Lord Ramachandra, anything he did is Supreme Lord.
Yep.
Benefits for the person.
Yeah, we're not questioning his choice. But we're trying to understand what's the dynamic. So I like this. It's a very nice example. So the question that you're asked is following the prior question. It's on the same topic. Your qualification and mine have not to do with birth, but it especially has to do with the gift of the superlative acharya, representative of the Supreme Lord, to help us become Vaishnavas. And by becoming Vaishnava in principle in this age of Kali is very special, but at the same time made easy. And to the degree that we become Vaishnava-like, we become Brahmana-like. It's a little bit like the discussion that happened this midday today. But we're not promoting. We're not a vegetarian organization. We're a bhakti organization, because by becoming a bhakta, one will become a vegetarian. But if one becomes a vegetarian, one is not necessarily going to become a bhakta. Birds are vegetarian, but they're not bhaktas, for the most part at least. You have something further.
may I?
Yeah, you got the microphone.
So Maharaj, again from Bhagavad Gita only, 9.32, Lord Krishna is saying, Mam hi partha vyapashritya yepi syuh papa yonaha striyo vaishyas tatha shudras tepi yanti param gatim. So,
You're confirming what he said.
well, a little bit in the sense that it is said here, papa yonaha means from the womb,
Yes.
a lower womb.
Yeah.
And I remember in Sridhar Swami's commentary to this verse, he writes that the birth in a specific womb is also governed by the past karma and guna of the individual.
Yes, it is.
So a given birth in a certain varna is also the individual's own past karma. So it spans across births. It's not just this birth's guna karma vibhagashaha.
Yeah, well, the question, let's go back to the question. The question is, why is it that a Shudra can't engage in austerities? Because we're not supposed to discriminate like that. So if he's a Shudra engaged in austerities, it sounds good. But instead of being good, it caused the death of a Brahmin's son, and it caused his head to get chopped. So it's not just what his birth was, is the point. So that his birth has so much to do with guna and karma of the past, particularly karma, but also guna. So there's a mix. So it's deductive. That's where I'd like to say, read what our acharyas have to say, because Snehavali is going to remind me to do that research or reach out to the people that are going to help me research. What was it about the fellow? It's not just his birth, but it's something about the character of the fellow, in addition to his birth. It's the blend. Something else?
One very minor point, Maharaj, but another related thing that comes to mind is Ekalavya's disobedience of Dronacharya, and Dronacharya in the Mahabharata. I think he gives a long explanation of why he asked the Ekalavya's thumb to be cut, even though it seemed like a very... There are many differences, but there seems to be, at least to me, some similarity of the harshness. But there in the Mahabharata, there is an explanation about that. I think I heard a class about it from some devotee a while back. So maybe
Meaning there was harshness was justified because of the person.
Because of Ekalavya's character and
Yeah, having not to do with the birth, but having to do with the character. Mm-hmm. So again, my guess is the commentators on the Ramayana would have something to say on why, and not just by birth, but by character. So this young lady in the middle here, she's been enthusiastically waving her arm. Here comes the microphone.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the wonderful lecture. I was wondering that...
Thank you for the wonderful question before you even speak it.
Wonderful lecture. I was wondering that there are many devotees of Lord Ram, but who's the greatest devotee?
But what's the question?
There are many devotees of Lord Ram, then who is the greatest devotee?
Who's the greatest devotee? What lens you want to look through? You want to look through the lens of rasa? You want to look through the lens of satisfaction? What do you want to look through the lens of? Complete surrender? Let's do the Atma Nivedana one. Who's the Atma Nivedana one? Bali Maharaj, right? He's the example of Atma Nivedana. He surrendered everything, body, mind, words, all possessions, everything. And when Vamana tied him up, he made no protest, offering all respects to others without any expectation, respect in return. You know the Sanskrit for that verse? Amanina manadena. You know, Shikshastaka. Trinadapi sudechena. Taror ivasihishnuna. Amanina manadena. Kirtaniya sadahari. You know that one? You're not familiar. Shikshastaka 3. You're going to be a learned young lady one day, and so this is a nice one for you to learn. You see the girl over there to your left, Rishta? She'll teach you that verse. Right as soon as we're done, she'll show you and teach you, and you can learn that verse. It's a verse spoken by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to explain how to get some taste for chanting. 4 principles. Humility, tolerance, offering respect to others, and then the most difficult of them all is no expectation of respect in return. Who does that, really? Supposing you go out of your way to do something really nice for somebody. At least you'd expect thank you. I mean, just civilized person is say, gee, thanks. It's just social, normal life. But supposing they don't even say thanks. Supposing they stick their tongue out at you and give you one of those. Whoa. But, staying in that mood of just wanting to render some service without any expectation. So that's an impetus to stay so connected with Krishna and the holy name of Krishna that there's taste for the position of being the servant of Krishna and Krishna's holy name. So, let's go back to your question. Speak your question again after you've heard what I just said.
Who is the greatest devotee of Lord
The
Ram?
greatest devotee. Greatest devotee is one who's pure in heart, and there's many who are pure in heart. So they're all the greatest. But the greatest is one who has unalloyed devotion. So then you can take a look at those who have unalloyed devotion through different lenses. We just heard one over here. The greatest is Bharata. But then someone else might say something else. So it depends on the lens you look through. According to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the greatest are the gopis. I'm sure you're familiar. There's a very nice verse that's it's an introduction or an invocation verse to a commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam by Srinath Chakravarti Thakur. And in that verse, he says, according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the greatest of all devotees of the Lord are the gopis. In the group of the gopis, Vraja Vidu Vargena. Vraja, Vadu, ladies, Vraja Vadu, Vargena, the group of gopis. They're the greatest. And that's the opinion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's a rasa lens. Of course, there's the greatest amongst the greatest. You know who that is. But it's in rasa perspective. The intensity of sweetness of love. Who's your favorite? I'm asking you. You ask me. Who's the greatest devotee in your estimation?
Of Lord Krishna
Krishna?
or Lord Ram?
No, but they're the object of love. What about the devotee who's carrying love towards the object?
Radharani?
Radharani, okay. You're in Lord Chaitanya's camp. Then here's a nice thing for you to do. Learn what are the ways in which Radharani loves Krishna. And as you meditate on the ways in which Radharani loves Krishna, your appreciation of the sweetness of her love for Krishna will grow and grow. Even when Radharani talks back. Because sometimes she talks back. She looks the other way. She tells Lita, get him out of here. Tell him to go away. It's part of her love. It's not just playing hard to get. It's just Krishna likes. And she speaks that way. There's a book, one of the books written by Jiva Goswami is Madhava Mahotsava. Madhava Mahotsava. Maha Utsava. Big festival. Madhava Mahotsava. And in the story, interesting, the second half of that book, there's a big festival for Radharani where she's made the queen of Braja. But it's called Madhava Mahotsava. But she's becoming the queen. And part of that scene is Krishna does something, she becomes angry, and she gets up and leaves. And Krishna becomes very sorry. And Purnamasi, You know who's Purnamasi? Purnamasi? She's the Yogamaya personified in Vrindavan. So Purnamasi goes, because Krishna's in big anxiety. Radharani left and she's offended. And so Purnamasi goes to look for Radharani. She can't find Radharani. She can't find Radharani. Then she finds Radharani. And Radharani's in a cabin talking to herself. And she says to herself, why do I get like this? He's the Lord of my life. There isn't anything that means anything to me other than him. And sometimes I get like this. I don't understand it. Purnamasi's overhearing her talking to herself. And she comes inside. She's very elderly. She's a Brahmani. She's the village elder in the whole of Vraja. Everyone listens to her. So she puts her arm around Radharani, consoles Radharani. Krishna's missing you so much. Please come with me. So Radharani, heart melts, and she comes with Purnamasi. And there's a big festival to make her the queen of Vrindavan. And that's how the rest of the book is a Radharani festival. So she who is the dearest, the greatest, most elevated, is sometimes in controversy. Now, Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune in Vaikuntha, she doesn't do it like that. And sometimes Sita, a little bit, but not quite like that. She didn't get off in a huff and go away. But it's out of love that she does what she does. And Krishna loves what she does. She's according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I think that's captured your heart too. So learn about the ways in which she's appreciated and loved by Krishna and all the Brijbasis. Okay. I knew it was going to be a nice question. You were so enthusiastic. Anyone else? We'll end. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki.